Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there, welcome back.
Hey guys, so before we get going, just want to ask everybody to make sure you're subscribed to both channels, EEARTS and Evolutionary, and also check out Evolutionaryenergyarts.com if you want to learn more about us and what we do when we're not making videos, which is most of the time. And we want to thank our Patreons and those that support us on Ko-Fi as well. And do check out Medicinal Foods. Use coupon code EEA. It gets you a discount. It does also support the channel. Lots of good stuff there for detoxing, boosting the immune system. And so we made a video. It was like 20-something minutes outside in the yard with the pups running around, and then had technical difficulties. So we're going to break it down a little bit and talk about this section of it, which is talking about the densities, where we are, who we are, what we are. You know, there's a lot more than meets the eye when it comes to existence.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of different energy forms, you know, and when we're looking at this energy and in this spectrum, we're only seeing a very teeny tiny sliver of the visible light spectrum in comparison to this huge, ginormous light spectrum. We only see the tiniest little bit, and there's so many other details in between.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. I think a lot of people are very, very visual, so we just wanted to put this up on the board, and maybe it'll help with explaining a little bit. So there's one source, which encompasses the manifest and the unmanifest. It encompasses everything that ever was, everything that ever will be, everything that could be, and everything that isn't.
Mm-hmm. And all that in between.
Yeah, and then when we talk about that divine feminine energy, the mother energies, well, we're talking about the mother of manifestation. And that doesn't mean just on 3D. That's on all densities. Mm-hmm. So the divine feminine, you could think of it as that which is, that which was, and it's still that which will be, but as far as the manifest side of things. Mm-hmm. So, you know, again, there's so many things that have infiltrated every tradition that we could look at. And we could look at the Gnostic point of view, and now not all Gnostic point of views were the same. Just like when Christianity first came out, you know, there wasn't one unified vision. Not at all. They debated, well, who was Yeshua? Was he God? Was he man? Was he God-man? And you got to realize, too, there was this tradition in every culture that speaks of the gods. And when they speak of the gods, they're speaking of beings that were more advanced than humans, but appeared to humans in a physical sort of way. Every culture talks about this. Mm-hmm. Yet they're not source. They're not source in its entirety. Yet source is within them, source is within us. So there is one source, there is one God with a big G, so to speak. But anything that could be named is not that source, because it's beyond any naming. So if you look to the Tao Te Ching, it does a good job in explaining how the Tao is everything, and it's everything that isn't. But anytime you think you've named it, you haven't.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just when you look in the Bible and it says, and God commanded all of these things to happen, you really have to be careful and ask yourself, well, which God are they referring to? Because I guarantee you it's not the one source.
Absolutely. So people will say, well, the only one true God. And again, that is one of the biggest distortions in history, because there is one source, but they got us always divided. And divided over dogma, that's just basically a story. There's no reality in it. It's all about keeping us divided. So there is one source, which again encompasses the manifest and the unmanifest, everything that is, was, will be, and also anything that could be. So it's that potential, whatever could be conceived of, because ultimately, again, thoughts are as real as anything. And this very reality we know on the quantum level, it's waiting for you. It's waiting for you to decide what it's going to be, because it reacts to our consciousness. Everything about this reality is all about consciousness. This is a reality that's created for consciousness to explore, learn, and to grow. It's not about basically us being created as a slave to serve anybody. Because ultimately, if you get down to it, even these higher beings with much more technology, they're not really higher up than us when you recognize the source energy that's within us. Now, with each density, there's many, many different subdivisions. So like Cindy was saying, she was looking at the lines and I'm drawing them as I'm drawing them in the 4D zone. And you see I have down there Enlil, Enki, Marduk, and all those beings that we could call them Asuras, we could call them gods, we could call them Anunnaki. Again, everything is just labels, and labels can be used to divide us. They're there at the very threshold of 4D. So they're in the lower astral realm. They're in the lower 4D area, which many will recognize this is the area of nightmares, so to speak. Now, 4D is something that's not foreign or alien to us, because when we sleep, that's where we are. We're there in 4D. And so when you go higher up the line and you go into a different classification of being, like Thor or Odin, but they're still 4D beings. And depending on where we are resonating at any time when we go and sleep, if we're in a really good place and our vibrations are super high, say you went to a kirtan, say you went to some sort of beautiful festival that was all full of high vibrations, and you go to sleep that night, you might find yourself on upper 4D having an absolutely fabulous experience. Now, if you went and saw a horror movie and it's sticking in your consciousness and you have nightmares, you might find yourself on the lower 4D. You might find yourself in that lower astral realm with all those dark, nasty little ticks and leeches of the lower astral realm. When we're waking, we've been in 3D, and at some point in time, and actually for some people now, even when they're awake, they are experiencing 4D and 3D kind of simultaneously. But this is part of the ascension process as we make our way back up from the bottom point in the ascension process, the Kali Yuga, start going out of the Dark Age, and then you could look at it as Bronze Age, Silver Age, Golden Age. The Golden Age will have us back up in that 5D, and we'll be reunited with, in most cases or many cases, our higher selves. Like when we make that term, and we talk about our higher self, it's that part of us which is still operating on the higher density. We are a lot more complicated than we understand. Consciousness itself is there's just a lot more to it than what we've been told in the religious, stories and traditions. You have to really delve deep.
And I think it's really important to understand, like in our daily lives, when we are exposed to a lot of stressors, we're exposed to a lot of worry, we're really pushing ourselves beyond where we should. These are the things that when you go to sleep at night can really put you in that realm where other entities might be able to toy with you, give you nightmares. So if you're under a lot of stress, that is, you do kind of open yourself up to those energies. And that's why it's really important, like before we go to bed, is to spend some time in meditation. Write down some things that you are grateful for. You want to pull yourself up and out of that state of mind where you're really, really stressed. And another thing that's done to us to hold us in that lower 4D is just life in general, having to go to work, the hustle, the daily hustle, the rat race, the arguing, the fussing, the he said, she said, no, this is, you're wrong and I'm right. All of that anchors us down into that lower 4D. So taking the time for yourself at night to pull up and out of that so you can have those more productive, better dreams instead of being pulled down with those entities that are going to toy with you.
Absolutely. So, you see our higher selves there. Now, it depends on the individual and the soul, because again, new souls, so to speak, are being born all the time off of Source. Source is always basically taking little bits of itself and fractalizing it. And this is one of the biggest keys to understand, is the fractal nature of the universe. Everything is fractals. Everything is fractals. And what are fractals? Fractals are like a part that contains the entirety of the whole. It's kind of a reflection of, and this is the as above, so below. This is created in God's image, so to speak. And so, I mean, we could always interpret these things in many ways, because, you know, people that believe that the Anunnaki are our complete creators will say we're created in the image of the Anunnaki. Well, you know, they tinkered with our genetics, absolutely. But our soul is a reflection of Source, the one Source, and not the different gods that can be named, the one Source. So in that sense, yeah, again, we are created in Source's image. I think when you say Source, though, then you get to the root of the matter. And so what I was talking about before was how, you know, there was not one unified Christianity. There was not one unified Gnostic point of view either. There were those Gnostic theories that said that all of creation is evil. And I feel like that's a distortion. That's, again, the controllers making their way in and distorting things, as they are always want to do, because they want to cover up true knowledge of how everything works. If they're the only ones that understand how the universe works, then everybody else is being kept in the dark, and they could manipulate everybody. They could get everybody to do their will. Not your will. No, their will. They even have us praying that. They even have us praying that their will be done on earth as it is on Nibiru. You know, and again, why don't we get a little more specific with it, right? So when we see the devas there on 5D, many of the devas operate between 5D and much higher realms, 6D, 7D, even above. And again, how high does it go? I don't think anybody really knows. Honestly, I know Barbara Brennan had seen, I think 13 or 14, I want to say 14 different layers to the human energy body, and I feel like each of these layers in some ways corresponds to different densities. And so, you know, it's again, it could be an infinite number of densities. And we might be talking about these beings like the devas so high up, and still there's so much more to go. And then we get into these archetypes. And archetypes are something that every one of us is based on an archetype. Think about binary code and everything that could be created just by zeros and ones. Then we look at different archetypes. And, you know, in some traditions, there might be 7 archetypes, other traditions, 12 archetypes. Again, these archetypes are a pattern of sorts. And this is, again, how things kind of work to take form as they come down from Source, down through the densities. They take on certain archetypal characteristics. And so you might find that, you know, in general, you've always been maybe a nurturer. Maybe that's just what comes natural to you. And you find yourselves gravitating towards, you know, either being a homemaker, you know, the perfect mom, or maybe you're a nurse or a doctor or a counselor, something along those lines. We just have these natural tendencies in us to gravitate towards certain things. Another person might be a protector, might be a divine warrior of sorts. Could be, you know, one that's a teacher. That's just what comes natural, is teaching. There's all these different archetypes, which are basically patterns. And there's all these different mixtures of patterns. When we look to a Vedic chart and say we're looking at, okay, well, your ascendant is Gemini, right? But what degree? And again, that's what we're talking about when we're looking at 4D here. Oh, that's a 4th density being. Yeah, but what degree? The ones down at that lower level, you don't want to really be around. The ones at the high level, they're pretty benevolent, and they're for the most part nice guys, so to speak, and nice gals. So again, it depends on the degree as well. And Cindy could talk more about this, because, you know, this is part of why astrology is what it is, and Vedic astrology being so accurate. Because each one of these stars, each one of these planetary bodies is a being that has a distinct personality. And being that they are such large beings, and they are supporting so much life, because again, each one of us is supporting trillions of beings. And we are a universe unto them. To certain bacteria in your body, you're the entire universe. And they might look like just these squiggly lines or circles, or something that looks kind of gross under a microscope. Now they might envision themselves flying around in cars, flying cars or whatever. We don't know how they envision themselves. It could be that they don't look like to themselves what we see when we look under a microscope. Now, to certain beings of a very, very enormous nature, expansive nature, we might look like tiny little bacteria, so to speak, to them.
Right. When we look at the planets, we can correlate it to this, because we definitely look at the degrees in which it's sitting in that zodiac sign, and we have separating planets and we have manifesting planets, and each planet has its varying different degrees in a certain zodiac sign. And that says, is it an immature planet? Is it an old elderly energy that's kind of frail, or is it very young and strapping kind of energy? So those energies in varying degrees make huge differences. And then, like, if you look at Vedic astrology, you can slice that pie up into 1,000 pieces. But also that knowing that 1,000 pieces is going to help you understand about who you are. And this is what we are definitely trying to explain to people, like, what kind of power do you hold in 3D? And it's a lot. We are very powerful beings. We are co-creators, and we can create our own surroundings. That's really key to remember. What we keep up in our mind's eye is what we are going to manifest on the outside. Hence, that mood being lifted is so very important for our benefit. But look what they do. They surround us with all of these nasty things, when it comes to the news. It's all bad news. So you're keeping in your mind's eye, if you're watching mainstream, you're keeping in your mind's eye all of that negativity. And guess what you're going to produce? So that's why our mind, our self, the being who is in the mind's eye, is so important to have that be a positive thing.
Absolutely. So again, if you are the type that only believes what you can see, well, you're limited. You're just missing out on the total reality of things. As you see, this is the visible light spectrum. Do microwaves really heat food? Not that I would use one, but yeah, they can do that. Do you ever listen to FM or AM radio? Well, you listen, you hear with your own ears. You can see they're at a totally different spectrum than the visible light spectrum. And so again, that's just a tiny, tiny, tiny portion of all that there is. And yet, when we're talking about consciousness, everything is always changing. So your moods can change. You could feel blue, or you could feel healthy and bursting with energy. When traumatic events are brought about, people that would naturally be moving upwards in vibration out of any sort of lower frequencies can be made to experience a lower density existence through these tragedies and traumas. This is why we have wars without end. It's because they're trying to take this state of being and make us more blue, or make us sad, scared, apprehensive, frightened. They're trying to steal our energy. And that's exactly what is going on with this whole experience in the world. There's much more than meets the eye. And again, we're about to take a step, into their home territory, so to speak. But we have like a get out of jail free card naturally, which would take us straight up into that 5D experience and reintegrating ourselves with our higher selves. So again, the fractal nature of the universe, it's key to understanding that.
It really is. And you know, when we talk with people and they say, I want to know my guides and my angels, to give a description is really easy of that entity. The hard part lies in the actual name, because we deal in vibrations. Everything has its own vibrational frequency. So names are a man-made construct, and that's what makes names so difficult to explain. But you can explain the nature of a being, you can explain the desires of a being, because you're given all these different emotional vibrations to use to explain with. And when you're dealing with source energy, you are dealing with all of these beautiful patterns. And someone was asking me, what pattern do I see with source? And the pattern that I use when I repattern people is actually it's called the golden ratio, or some people call it phi, and that's the pattern I use. To me, that really helps someone blend in with the source energy, and that helps someone make their moves or their daily decisions based on their highest level of occupancy. So there's so much to this, and it's just an ongoing learning playground that never gets dull, never gets boring, but you do have to allow for some of what you have learned to fall away, because remember, they teach us what they want us to know, because that helps keep us in control. So we have to be willing to open up our hearts to a lot of this information to help us expand and grow into the true enlightenment.
Yeah, so, quantum entanglement, which Einstein called spooky action at a distance, is really an amazing thing. So if we think of everything as being one, and then you could visualize it as a big bang, and all of a sudden that one is just blowing itself up into an infinite number of little things. At one time, there was the oneness, and that never ends. That never ends, and it doesn't matter what densities we're on. It never ends. We are all tied together. And so when we see Earth, and Earth as it transit through these different densities and now is on a return path back up to its higher self, it still has an aspect of itself that's always with it, just like with us. There's our higher self is always with us. Our higher self is on those other densities. And going back to what we were showing here, this is kind of a temporary us. We're here in this vehicle. The vehicle's not us. My first car was a 1970 Chevy Impala that was like a tank. It's probably, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a toaster now, a couple toasters. Who knows what it is? It's the same thing with our bodies. Zeke was a wonderful friend, and he's still with us, and he still jumps into Rama's body from time to time, and you could tell when he does that. So he is still his own being, even though his body is no longer with us. And his consciousness is actually able to join with Rama's at time. Our consciousness, it's the same thing. So my mother, for instance, big jazz fan. I mean, she's a huge jazz fan. And I find it curious that now all of a sudden, after she's passed on, I've just grown a little bit more into like jazz music and exploring it. And I was wondering, is it just nostalgia? Is it just, I'm thinking of her in a positive light and all the stuff she used to listen to? I don't think so. I think it's more than that. And then Cindy was giving me a message from the guides where the guides say, well, yeah, she could live through you now. So when we talk about this, our guides actually can live through us. And sometimes we're the guides living through others when they take their turn on this density.
And a lot of people that I know are having these experiences when a loved one dies. They start taking on a lot of their mannerisms, especially it seems like if it's a parent. They might start to dress a little more like them. They might start to, like Mike, listen to a little more music that their parents listen to. And this is absolutely your loved one who is merging with you and just wanting you to understand that they are there, they have not gone anywhere, trying to bring you a little bit of comfort. So that's very, very common for these things to happen if we lose a loved ones and they're no longer here in the 3D where we can see them, but they're definitely here where we can feel them.
Consciousness doesn't all of a sudden not be. Consciousness is all that there is. So in that sense, we should never really fear anything. And when it comes to our lives here, again, they can do terrible things. There's been horrible atrocities that have happened all throughout time. We talked about World War II on the first video today on Evolutionary and what was done to so many people. Well, they could crush every car I ever had and turn them into all the toasters they want. They're still not going to, I'm not going to let them touch my soul and change my soul. And that's just the realization of the bigger picture. Because, again, this is trial by fire in so many ways. And Cindy had brought up Peter Dunev, who I don't know if he was always our guide, or maybe even maybe we are kind of co-fractals in some ways, because he overshadowed me when I was in meditation. And then we were sharing information about what he saw. And he saw that galactic superwave coming that changes everything in an instant. And, by the way, he had an affinity for Qigong and music as well. So I do think that we share a similar fractal at the top, at the higher end. When you get down to it, we can view ourselves as fallen angels, those of you that are lightworker starseeds. And there's a negative connotation associated with that term on the mainstream religion. And again, the mainstream religion comes from the controllers. So if you're believing exactly what they're selling, you're missing the big picture. You're just believing them as if you're believing MSNBC, Fox News, as if you're believing the words of number 46 or Nancy Pelosi or anything else, because it's just part of the control mechanism. Mm-hmm. It's part of the story they are selling you. And this is, again, they are always trying to trap people in boxes. And, we escape one box, fine, we're still in another. And it could be that Cindy and I are still in another box to be realized too at some level. But we do know we've been through this cycle many times on Earth, and I'm thankful that we have that knowledge so we know to hold steadfast.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's that information when you start to understand, okay, there's really something's not right here. They're very good about bringing us up in the 3D realm and showing us all of this logic and training us really well to leave it to the professionals. Trust the professionals. They have the science. The science is the most solid thing you're ever going to see, but it only takes a simple glance back to science class and realize how many times have those science books been rewritten? How many poor children failed a science class when all the information that they gave was probably right, but it was marked wrong? Take a look back and compare all the 3D logic to what you know now and realize, no, they're not the professionals. Your soul is the professional, allowing it to open up and feel and breathe and see that which it came here to experience is you.
And so, there's a reason why this world is all about obtaining degrees, obtaining quote unquote education. It's all about the left brain. What does the left brain know? The left brain memorizes facts and figures and learns to think in a linear sort of in a linear manner. When we talk about God being love, if Source is love ultimately, Source is emotions and feeling. So there's a reason why we're told, like if you look to Star Wars, what does Yoda say to Luke? There's a lot of truth hidden in a lot of these things. It's right there in front of our faces. Of course, we'll just say, that's just a movie. That's just part of the script. And even these actors, we're seeing that the actors that are politicians, the actors that are in Hollywood, they're all working for the same people. They're all part of the same system. It's sad, but it's true. But yet the truths are out there. Yoda says, search your feelings. Don't think, but search your feelings. What are you feeling? Trust your feelings. We're taught to trust logic. We're taught to trust Logical deduction given the parameters that they give us. Their indoctrination. Trust the left brain logic. Trust the science. Yeah. That's ever changing. That's ever suiting what they want to tell us. Trust your feelings. Look to these beings. What do they make you feel? Do they make you want to vomit? Do they make you feel like you got to go run and take a shower now? Because you just, watched the sickle maker or watched one of these other beings that their energy is horrible. Trust your intuition. Trust your feelings. That's the side that we operate on that's of a higher level, a higher density. That's the side that comes from source. Any facts and figures can always be modified later on. They could be changed, or they could be outright lies. Trust your feelings.
Yes, do trust your feelings. Our emotions are very, very powerful. And a lot of us have strong emotions, and that's because things can be done with these emotions. Thoughts are things. They're actually things that you can move forward and move with to manifest. And that's what these controllers understand. So that part of it, they do keep to themselves, but they're very, very good at using it because they get this other information about consciousness and how to utilize, how to manipulate from other sources. So, but we do have each other. We can co-create. We can lean on each other. We just have to get past all the divisiveness, the politics, the things, in medical fields, he said, she said, all of those things, so that we are allowed once and for all to come together and work more as one to get something much larger than ourselves put into place and maybe create a path for our children and grandchildren.
Absolutely. So we hope that you guys got something out of this. Please leave your comments, your thoughts, your feelings, your observations, your experiences. Share with each other. As it is very needed in these times. So as always, guys, source bless and namaste.
Namaste.